I bought a 2002 Kawasaki KX from thousands of miles away, sight unseen. I leaned heavily on my hometown friends and family to get the bike picked up, delivered, and up to race spec. Just within a few weeks. The guy said it was a race-ready bike. He said it was his backup bike, so it should be ready to go, right? Right? Well, buckle up, because this is the story of the KX, the time we tried so hard. So, like everything in 2025, it starts on the internet. I was scrolling through, as you do, and I noticed a GNCC race in Michigan was changing things up. They were having the slower classes race before all of the faster, more pro classes. This is huge for GNCC, totally different, and it's more similar to the format that I'm used to racing in Mexico. I try to visit home once a year for a race, so this was perfect. I wanted to support this change. Last year I raced a young teenager's Honda CRF 150F. It had small wheels, small suspension, small frame, and I had a ton of fun. This year I thought, okay, but what if I show up on a bike designed for a fully grown person? So I set out to make that happen. I sent out about a dozen "Is this still availables" on Facebook Marketplace, and for some reason, every single person ignored me. My next step was to go into the local track and trail Facebook groups. This worked, actually. I got a few people trying to sell me dual sports, which was really nice, and I do appreciate them. But I politely declined because I was looking for something more race focused, something more like what I was used to, something that would be more ready for jumps, whoops, and tight single track. Eventually, I got the notification that I was waiting for. Hey, I have this 2002 Kawasaki KX 250. It's my spare bike for racing just in case my new KTM fails. So I jumped on this because hell yeah, I want to race an old school two-stroke. Duh. Suddenly, the guy gets hard as hell to contact, and it's taking days for him to reply just to figure out where the heck I can pick the thing up. Which isn't all that easy because, like I said earlier, I was thousands of miles away, so trying to coordinate between my family going to pick up the bike and the guy who won't reply to me. Normally, this isn't a big deal, but when you're on a deadline, this kind of stuff really matters. Eventually, my mom and dad were able to go pick up the bike and pay for it. They don't know anything about dirt bikes. They weren't really able to inspect it or anything like that. I just was going off trust because that's what you do, racers to racers. Why would we lie to each other, right? By the time my parents were able to deliver the bike to BK, my childhood friend since second grade, since 7 years old, who is now an aircraft mechanic and 100% the most detail-oriented mechanic I've ever known, so I trust this guy. I'm excited. But I only gave him 3 weeks. But it shouldn't be a problem because the bike's race ready, right? But because BK is a mechanic and one with a deadline, he wasn't all too interested in videoing, filming, and just talking to cameras. I wasn't there to help and to be around and bug him, so this part of the build is pretty much off camera. What I do have is a bunch of photos that I can put on the screen and talk about what's going on. What we did was basically we started this whole process over text message. BK was super excited to work on the old KX because he's the same age as me and we both love these early 2000s two-strokes. It's just, they're cool to us. So first things first are a bunch of photos from BK. And during this photo taking process, the initial inspection, we're starting to realize that this KX is actually just a mangled mess wrapped up with a nice set of plastics and graphics. There are some serious issues that make this KX not race ready. It's not even close to rideable. It would be unsafe to ride. But okay, no worries, we have time. Let's make a list. And let's start ordering some parts. We only are going to replace what absolutely has to be done in order to make it safe to race. Nothing just for cosmetics, nothing just because it could be better. Only things that have to be done. So what was this race-ready KX in need of? Let's start our way from the front and work our way back. That's the easiest way to do it. The front tire, that's normal, but it needs to be replaced. The brake pads were basically metal on metal, and oh my god, the fluid in this thing was like a chunky brown. So new brake fluid, new brake pads, new tire. Not so bad. BK removes the axle and realizes that the axle was literally floating around on one side. There's a giant gap around the axle and where it's supposed to be held in place. There's spacers just gone. It doesn't exist. The best we can figure is that these forks are actually from a 95 to a 97 KX. The axle is from a 2002 and the hub is from a 2000 era. This is all just visual inspection. We have absolutely no idea, but none of it fits together. So BK basically, because he's a magical wizard, figures out a way to make some spacer that he had for a KTM fit, cuts it to the right length. I think he may have even taken it to the metal lathe and lathed it out, so that now the axle is no longer flopping around on the one side. That's insane to me that somebody would sell someone a bike without even letting them know, oh, by the way, the front axle is only connected on one side and the other side is just kind of flopping around. But after this fiasco, basically the front end is good. We got wheels, bearings, hubs, all this stuff is all sorted out. Brakes work, although the KX brakes from that era are pretty terrible, but they did work. Everything up front is good. But let's move back to the middle now. So we're in the shock area, swing arm area. Everything that can be worn and loose is worn and loose. And I mean everything. Every bearing, every bushing, everything from the shocks, linkage to the swing arm. Even the brake pedal itself looks like it's just been sanded in every possible surface. It's never seen maintenance, and if it has, it's been 10 years since. So we buy all these things. We bought the linkage bearings, we bought anything that we could buy, and it's on its way. BK gets the linkage bearings in and goes to install them, and they just don't fit. They're wrong. It's at this point we're starting to realize that nothing about this bike is a 2002. So we have to check the frame and figure out what's going on. Frame says 2000, dead. Okay, so the frame is from 2000. Should we order 2000 linkage bearings? Well, we're starting to visually inspect this linkage and realizing, no, the linkage is from 1997. So we have to actually order linkage bearings from 1997 for our 2002, actually 2000 KX 250. So we get those ordered in, and again, this is all eating into our deadline. We are on a very serious crunch, but we order those in, and BK is able to swap these now time-appropriate linkage bearings in. Yeah. He also took some time to take the brake lever into work, which is, he's an aircraft mechanic, so he has access to a full slew of tools that I have just dreams of seeing. And he manages to make it go from floppy to tight. And that makes a big difference, because before, when you push the brake pedal, it would actually hit the peg before it would engage the rear brakes. Again, the rear brake fluid was swamp fluid, and the brake pads were metal to metal, so it wouldn't even matter if I could hit the brakes, it wouldn't do anything. So we got the middle area sorted out, everything is less floppy. Now we move back to the rear wheel, so we're almost there. We're almost ready, the chassis is almost ready. The rear wheel was bad, really bad. Everything about that situation was terrible. The rear brake was installed crooked, off center. Everything about the rear brake installation was wrong. So BK went about changing the pads, changing the swamp fluid. Yeah, he also fabricated a fix for the brake to make it sit straight. And on top of all that, he did manage, like I talked about before, he managed to fix the brake pedal, so everything is, I don't know, the guy's a wizard. There's no other way to describe it. The guy's an absolute wizard. He has the brakes fixed on the rear wheel, but this isn't the end of the rear wheel story. No. At some point, someone couldn't get the rear wheel bearings out because of a C-clip. So instead of carefully and heating up the perimeter and removing the C-clip with patience, no, they just took a hammer to it and just bashed away everything that held that C-clip in place. And now there's no more C-clip. So it's just a hub with two sides that are just eaten alive by a hammer, and then just the bearings can fall out at any time. There's no seal, there's no C-clip, nothing. There were many spoke nipples that were stripped out, as well as a few spokes that were just outright missing. The rear wheel was terrible. It was in all kinds of disrepair. So the race-ready KX was actually really starting to stretch BK's patience, which is insane considering this is what he does for a living. He fixes things that are broken. But we decided, let's just order a new rear hub. Or new used. Let's just order a new used rear hub off of eBay or wherever. I can't remember what site we used. But for what year? It was a 98. We ordered for a 98 rear hub because BK did a ton of deep dives, as well as my wife. My wife is a research superhero. They figured out that the hub that was on there was for a 98. It would work with the spacers. They could make it work. So, yeah. So again, BK did his magic. Ordered this rear wheel hub for a 1998 and all the spokes, relaced it, put the hub into the rear rim, got the spacers, got the new wheel bearings, actually now has seals for the wheel bearings, and he did his magic and installed the bearings. Oh, and he also installed the C-clip to hold everything in place. So now we've got the front wheel, rear suspension, and rear wheel all sorted out. Yes! Are we safe to race now? Not ready to race, just safe enough to race. The engine was a freshly rebuilt unit, so honestly, we hadn't had any issues with it starting it and running it, except of course for the knockoff carburetor, which was giving us troubles with like jetting. Because the person who tuned this engine thought bigger means better on jets, so we had to actually, use a jet calculator to figure out what size to use, change those out, and that helped a lot. And you have to remember that we were on such a tight budget that focusing on the engine would have really been difficult considering we didn't have time. We just didn't have time. Nothing was from 2002 as we were told. Every single part required visual inspection and everything took forever because of that. We can't just order parts blindly. We tried that the first time and it ended up costing us almost a week. So at this point, I'm on the way to the airport. I'm going north. I'm going to go visit my family. I'm going to go race. I'm going to go see BK. Everybody's excited. I get a text from BK that says, "Do you have time to talk? Can I have a call?" Something along those lines. Turns out BK was letting the bike warm up because he wanted to make sure everything was good so that when he gave it to me later that day, that it would be good. He's just letting it idle, letting it warm up, and all of a sudden it seizes. Just comes to a dead stop. It's a hard engine seize. We're not talking about like it just shut off. It's seized. It wasn't quite game over, but BK was one step closer to the edge. Yes, Lincoln Park was huge when this bike was made. To make a terrible travel day short, it took 5 hours for me to get out of the Detroit airport due to flooding. I arrived at my parents' farm at 2 a.m. and no, I didn't get to see the KX on this day. The day after travel, I woke up as early as I could and headed to BK's house. It's more like a lab. Look, BK is in every possible way a better mechanic than I am. But in one small niche, I can hold a candle to him, and that is big bore two-stroke bikes. He just doesn't have any experience with them. Anything over a 50cc that he has built for his sons, he just doesn't know about. So I was like, if I can get to BK's house, I can help him rebuild this KX. We can tear it down, figure out what the problem was, and we'll figure it out together. We've still got, I think we had about a week, a little less than a week to order parts and get this KX fixed. I've got 600 hours on a big bore two-stroke. He's got 0. It just makes sense. So between BK being like the Harry Potter of the mechanical world and me being a muggle with an absolute ton of experience, we figured we could get this sorted out. Yes, again, Harry Potter was big and starting out when this bike was new. We had to figure out what happened, and the only way to do that is to tear things apart, which honestly, who doesn't love taking stuff apart? Not only did we find an exploded main bearing that actually caused the seizure, we also found a pinched crank seal that would have 100% caused a seizure, a lean seizure. And luckily, one didn't happen before the other, or honestly, the best time for it to happen was at idle. We got really lucky. I don't know how I can say this. We got lucky with an engine seizure a couple of days before a race, but we did get lucky that it happened at idle and not at full throttle. So yeah, the person who freshly rebuilt this engine really had no idea what they were doing. They didn't have the right tools for the job, and they just hammered this thing together, destroying the bearings and pinching a seal in the process. So we ordered the parts and had a plan to install them all still before the race, but we're running out of time.
You know what? This will decimate all after. You put about 15 grand in it or more if we have to. Overnight parts from Japan.
Yes, Fast and Furious was new when this bike was new. Look, man, life was wild back then. I don't know. We had Wizards, we had Fast and the Furious, we had Lincoln Park. The day I left after the complete engine teardown, though, BK didn't just send me home with nothing. He sent me home with his prized 2025 6 days 500, because that's just who BK is. He told me to put in as many hours as I could on the bike while we waited on parts, just in case. Because if the KX didn't work out, I would be riding the 500, which means he isn't racing. That couldn't happen. The whole reason I was there was to race with him. Still, I did take his advice. I had a few days before the bearings and seals arrived, and so I put in the hours and did in fact get used to the 500. That's a whole story of its own, but going from a 300cc 2-stroke to a 500cc 4-stroke is like, look, I don't have a 2000s reference for everything, but let's just say it's a big difference, okay? The race is on the 3rd. We assembled the engine on the 1st. And with only a few clumsy moments by me,
It's a 2-stroke.
because being autistic means I drop things all the time, we had the bike ready to test the day before the race. This is that test.
Missing some gears. I don't know what I'm stuck in. I think I'm stuck in second. What gear it's in, but it's stuck. I think it's second gear. Stuck in second. It's like not grabbing anything. Did we leave all the tools at home? Oh no, I have my backpack. Did I kill it? Also, rear brake ain't working. Like, Kawasaki don't want to race.
Yeah, a little over a minute. Transmission stopped shifting and the rear brake completely fell apart. Believe it or not, the transmission was a relatively easy fix, and BK had it sorted out by the end of the day.
We have shifting once again.
The biggest problem was the brakes. We just didn't have enough time to order what we needed, and being in northern Michigan, they just don't have 2002, 98, maybe 95 KX parts just laying around to buy in stores. We both knew we couldn't get the pin. We both knew that before we even loaded up the bikes. As we loaded up the KX, BK said to me, look, you're racing the 500 tomorrow.
So, I'll hit the pause button on the KX.
Yeah.
He knew that we couldn't get the brake pin in time. He knew we couldn't replace that. We were outright out of time. After all that crunch, all that teamwork between BK being a literal wizard, my wife being Neo from the Matrix and finding things online from 1,000 miles away, me kind of being useless. After all that teamwork, BK made the call. He said, I have never had a bike that I've worked on not finish a race. This isn't going to be the first. And oh yeah, I forgot to even mention the fact that the entirety of the power valve mechanism was completely obliterated, and my wife had somehow managed to find this obscure engine assembly part and have it shipped to us overnight just so that this could happen.
We have a functional power valve.
So the next day, I did something I literally thought I would never do. I lined up for a hair scramble race on a 500cc 4-stroke. This engine is so massive that honestly you don't even use the brakes. If you let off the throttle in attack position, you'll get thrown over the bars from the amount of engine braking that you're going to experience. Apart from the worst start in my racing career, you have to let the engine idle for like a split second before you hit the gas, and I'm so used to being able to hold the gas slightly and hitting it that I could not get that out of my head during the start. Despite this terrible start, I managed to have a pretty darn good race. Nope, I'm not a professional rider. All this drama for a guy to end up mid-class C-Pack. Turns out the times for C-class aren't actually that different from B, and I'm not exaggerating, because G and CC classes are so broken. The best possible outcome I could have had would have been to enter Open A. I'm not joking, by the way. And I would have come dead last and finished 6th place. My time would have put me in 6th place in A, but it would have put me in 14th place in both C class and B class. This class issue is such a frustration that I honestly believe that it is one of the reasons people starting motorsports leave. Why keep spending money to get into a sport only to get beat by people who have been in the sport for their entire lives? This is a serious problem. I don't mind losing, but I will say the fact that the people who won C class would have also won B class with their times is a little frustrating and kind of confusing. Why were they even in C class to begin with? I honestly wasn't there hunting for a trophy. I was extremely happy with my race and thought I had done a great job being aggressive and precise in my passing, holding a solid pace throughout the 2 hours of racing, not having a single crash, and utilizing the 500's power to make full use of the track sections for passing and doing everything I could to keep the pace high in the tight single track sections. I was proud of my performance in that race. I genuinely thought that it may have put BK's bike on the podium. Sadly, I wasn't even close. It was actually my worst ever race result. Am I upset about that? No, not even close. Could I have done better? No. I really think that I did the best I could. Maybe if my start wasn't terrible, I wouldn't have been stuck behind so many people on the first lap. Maybe I lost a minute to having to go from 37th to 11th place in that first lap. If that were the case, I would have been in contention for a podium spot. But that didn't happen. Would it have if I were on the KX? Look, the KX is an old school kickstart only. I very likely would have had a bad start on that as well. So overall, I'm really happy with my riding. I don't think that it could have done better. I'm happy. Seriously. Mid-class C-Pack or not, it's not my normal result, but I am very happy with the way that things went. I'm happy knowing that when things go sideways, my team is the best. I know that the people around me will move mountains to make things happen. That even from across the continent, my wife will make things line up like no other person in the world could do. That my friend from 2nd grade will be awake 20 hours at a time to make a race-ready bike actually rideable. And that when that doesn't work, the guy will literally give me his bike and his race just to make it happen. I know that my parents will drive across the state to buy a bike from a stranger that, in hindsight, kind of seems like a sketchy guy. That my dad, who has over 100 sheep to care for on his farm, will get home at 2 a.m. then just to move those sheep in the dark because that's just who he is. That's the kind of guy he is. I'm not a professional rider, and I never will be. This experience, the chaos of trying to make an old bike come together in the last hours, that is the reality for the majority of racers. The real lifeblood of motorsports is not the top tier teams. It's the long hours in the garage. It's the long days of travel. It's the unseen people that are happy as hell to have a good race even though they ended up solidly mid in the C class. If they were to make a reality TV show about pro riders, it would just be about some guys going to the gym, training, and racing. But if they made a reality TV show about the C class riders, honestly, I'm just saying, look, it was a wild month.